Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week exploring the genre of new wave. I've slowly made a couple of connections between our past two tracks, but overall, I don't have a strong understanding of what this genre is quite yet. So, we're going to move forward and check out a band we've had before, Talking Heads. So this one is interesting. It's called The Great Curve, and we're going to look at not an official video, but something from a channel called Anatomy of a Track, which looks like it's going to be plotting out everything in a type of notation that isn't traditional notation. So let's dive into this. This is The Great Curve from Talking Heads. So we have panning on our hand drums, a call and response between our two guitars,
Sometimes the world has a load of questions. Seems like the world knows nothing at all. The world is near, but it's out of reach. Some people touch it, but they can't hold on. She is moving to describe the world.
What?
There's messages for everyone. She is moving by remote control. Hands that guide her are invisible. The world has a way of looking at people. Sometimes we feel that the world is wrong. She loves the world and all the people in it. She shakes them up and she starts to walk. She is only partly human being. She defines the possibility.
It's what? It's so...
Holding on for an eternity. Ending without finishing.
Yeah, more rhythmic syncopation.
The world moves on a woman's hips. The world moves and it swivels and bumps. The world moves on a woman's hips. The world moves and it bounces and humps. What a night! She's gonna open her eyes up. What a night! She's gonna open her eyes up. She's gonna hold and move and hold and move and hold.
So we're bringing back this chorus. So we took all the embellishing vocal lines and smashed them together with no lead. I love that. Everybody else is real rigid and they start tossing in dotted notes. I had a totally different understanding of this solo in the first 5 notes. So, first of all, shout out to Anatomy of a Track for putting that together. Um, they don't have a lot of videos on their channel, and it looks like they use a completely different visual format for every song that they do this for. So it's not even like they just have this in place and they drop a file in and make a video. Everything about it is um, handpicked or handcrafted. Interesting. Also, I see Daily Doug's done this. This exact video actually. So this video seems to get around, which is pretty cool. Now let's get into the song though. This is honestly just a series of Hockets. A lot of series of layered Hockets. It's all over the place. And since it's not just a passing term and it's going to be something I use for a majority of this video, let's go ahead and define that real quick. A Hocket is when two or more instruments take turns playing parts of an idea so that it feels fragmented and scattered. When you hear the two voices, you got bop 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 bop. That's a Hocket, and they clearly define it with the two vocal bits by pushing them out to opposite sides. A lot of the percussive stuff that is Hocketed is divided in the production as well, and come to think of it, even the guitars are. A lot of it is very well. Actually, we can talk about the production. We're going to talk about the production because this could have been a mess. Um, Almost everything in here is Hocketed to some degree. I mean, even here's the thing though. Even if it's not Hocketed per se, because typically you would not give an instrument more than 2, 3, maybe 4 notes before passing it off to another instrument. Otherwise, you have call and response, which is something else they did. At the beginning, we had our two guitars. Everything about this track is conversational. It all fits together. None of it, I think, would really make sense on its own if you just have da 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 once every other bar. That's not interesting. It's not. It doesn't even really make much sense. It's just an isolated sound. I can't even know if I'd call it a riff. It's two notes being played back and forth. It's at best a picking exercise. um, the bass line, I think, is the only thing that isn't doing anything syncopated. Well, not doing anything hocketed. It is syncopated. It has elements where it shifts the emphasis. Well, the emphasis is always the same, but we have different types of lead-ins to it. But it always emphasizes a downbeat. Although, yeah. So I've got this part pulled up because I was actually going to showcase it a little bit. My mouse doesn't show up. That's fantastic. It's going to be very difficult to talk about this. The green area at the top, you can see a zigzag in the middle of this frame. If you go down to the left part on the bottom green line, there's also a little zigzag off on the left as well. And you can see spatially where one of the guitars da 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 is offset from the other ones. Now, the big triangles on the blue line, from what I could hear, are the bass guitar. Maybe there's two of them. Maybe it's showing a stereo element of the bass. I don't know. As far as I can tell, it's the only instrument that is displayed twice on the graph, unless I'm misreading that, and there are two of them. As you can see, though, there is no syncopation. The top one made of the triangles and the bottom one made of triangles are identical. Everything in the middle is percussion. The fat blocks on the bottom of the red are bass kicks. The lines in the middle of the red are, I believe, hi-hat, and the thin sticks above the red that are between the red and the blue on top are snare hits, possibly. And there are different sizes here. It's probably not as visible on this little graph up here, but with my bigger visual right here, I think that it is also denoting accents, stronger hits, maybe ghost notes versus full snare hits. Anyways, what I really wanted to point out here, though, is the bass kicks, which, like I said, are the fat rectangles on the bottom of the red bar. They are fairly consistent. I'm going to assume that these are downbeats. You'll notice the bass does not always line up with that. The bass is actually syncopated against it. Well, I should say the big parts of the triangles. Sometimes they do line up, sometimes they don't. And I find that to be interesting because, like I said, the bass isn't hocketed against anything, but it is syncopated, and it is syncopated against the heartbeat of the song, which is just, it's not unusual, but it's fantastic that even in this context, with all of this chaos going around it, they still decided not to keep the rhythm section. I was going to say boring, but that's not really the word I want. Simplified. They still went for rhythmic complexity there. And I think that's awesome. Oh, another cool thing. Let me pull this up one more time. In the green area, we have these dots. I think these were the hand drums. What's very cool, though, is that the black circles with the little white circle in it, such as the one that is on the farmost left of the video on either track, is an accented hit, where the filled in white circles are unaccented hits. And what's really cool is that we can see a trade-off here, where our top one accents on the downbeat. Actually, it accents on both downbeats, but there is a lead-in on the second one. Our bottom one doesn't accent again until an entire bar later, but they accent a beat and a half later as well, where the top one doesn't. So we actually have a syncopation of accented hits between our two sets of hand drums. That is, I mean, it's just, you don't even really notice it while you're listening to the song, but seeing it out on paper, like, this is just, it makes me want to listen to it again now that I know that it's there, because this was a lot to take in. I was trying not to look at the visuals as much, trying to lean into my typical method of listening, but after I realized the song is the same thing over and over, I decided to use some of the visual information to see if I can't glean any extra information out of this that maybe I didn't pick up listening. And it was a lot to take in. I had to learn how to decipher it first, so This is some of the stuff I picked up later on. What's really interesting is on the bottom row, again, you might not be able to notice this, but there's a huge set. There's like 10 hits in a row, and then an isolated hit. And then there's the part where I mentioned there's the accented, two unaccented, then an accented, an unaccented, and there's a even smaller dot after that, right in the middle of that bar, or right in the middle of those beats. It's at the and. I don't know what that is. I mean, could that be a ghost note? Is that a notation for maybe hitting the rim of the drums? I don't know. This notator though really thought of everything. There is so, and the cool thing is it's easy to read, right? So if I were to conduct this in a traditional orchestral setting, I would have the conductor sheet music in front of me, which would be everybody's parts, one staff per instrument. It is a skill that I don't have. I've never really taken conducting classes more than just a cursory like 101. I've never really dug into it. But I'm sure if you want to be a professional conductor, you're gonna have to learn this skill of how to read and, well, not necessarily read. Reading, it's easy. It's the same as anything else. But parsing the dense amount of information on it, this is I can get the gist of this really easy on a first glance. It compresses a lot of information into color coding. Now, granted, there's very little pitch information here, which is fine for this specific track. Like I mentioned, Anatomy of a Track utilizes different visuals for every song, it seems like. But for a highly rhythmic track like this, it makes sense to not give too much percussive or pitch information because the song really doesn't need it. I'm curious what they would do with something with a bit more melody to it. In fact, even the strongest melodic aspects, the guitar solo, which does get pitch visualization, but the vocal melodies get zero pitch visualization. I do feel like I'm talking about this specific video too much. I'm still just really in awe about all the work that went into it. Let's get back into Talking Heads, though. So, Hockets, tons of them, all over the place. Rhythmic syncopation, tons of it, all over the place. And this, I'm not even talking about vocals yet. Like, haven't even gotten there. Just in the guitars and the bass and the drum kit and the hand drums, we have a ton of rhythmically complex, interlaced, interwoven writing. It is honestly a masterclass at writing something so complex and it coming out on the other side ridiculously clear. Like, this is not complicated, and even beyond that, is it not? Well, I mean, it's not complicated to listen to, and even beyond that, I think this is fairly palatable. I think if you played this for people, they'd still be able to groove along with it, and maybe depending on how intently they're listening or how intently they typically listen to any music, they might not even notice the complexity and depth of what is going on here. This could, on the surface, for some people, just sound like a pretty typical pop rock track or new wave, as it is. Um, and that is no small feat right there, right? There is a very narrow line between being too complicated and too accessible that this could have landed on. And it walks that line perfectly, instead of falling to either side. And we're going to bring up production right here. A lot of that I'm going to give to the producer. The producer requires a ton of credit for this. Let's name some names here. Oh, it looks like it's the band. Produced by Talking Heads and Bryan Eno. And I'm pretty sure that that's just the band. See if we have person is recorded at a place. No, it looks like they did everything. Yeah, that's just. They wrote it, they produced it, they performed it. Wow. Okay, so they definitely just get all the credit for this. Interesting how Brian Eno is separately credited from Talking Heads, even though he's the bassist for Talking Heads. That's an interesting choice. But yeah, the production on this is not a song that you write and hand to an inexperienced producer. It's going to end up muddy and cluttered. It takes somebody with experience of multi-layered, multifaceted, deep layered performances to make this shine. In a live setting, it might be a little easier, but when you're putting something on vinyl or cassette or disc or whatever, you're making a studio version. You're gonna want a producer who knows what they're doing, of where to place things, and I think that's the big key right here. Everything is very sharp and crisp. There's a large amount of clarity per instrument, and then there's a lot of space between the instruments. At one time, there must have been 12 layers between all the voices and percussion and instruments. And everything seemed to have its place, even in the stuff that was hard pan left, the like left pan vocals and left pan guitar and the left pan hand drums, they all had space. They all felt like they were in unique areas of this left side, which I'm sure looks like right to you, but it's my left, I promise. They all felt like they had a unique area. It wasn't just y'all are crammed on the left side. It's you've got this place in the left side and this place in the left side. You're kind of center left. Sorry. And same goes for the right and even the center. Everything has its place. In fact, in a lot of ways, it feels more like an orchestral recording. Orchestras have very specific placements of instruments, and thus the recordings of shows tend to have very specific placements of instruments as well. And there's a lot of clarity to that. It's not just random where instrument groupings are on a stage. There's a reason for all of it. And it's usually acoustic qualities and sound carrying and placement of sound. And there's a lot of thought that goes into it to ensure that the sound is clear when it hits the audience or when it's being recorded. And this sort of attention to detail of placement reminds me a lot of that. Now, of course, this song isn't just the instruments. We have a ton of vocals in here, and the song starts off with just a single center panned channel. And honestly, if they had run with this, I still would have been glowing about this track. It still has a phenomenal instrumentation to it. It has a bit of a catchiness to it, but overall, not anything that I have much to gush about more so than the instrumentation. But there is a point when we hit a chorus, possibly, and two other vocal lines come in, both of them almost like a backing choir. They sing the same line over and over, where our middle channel lead vocal has a linear narrative to tell. It might be a recurring musical pattern, but the lyrical content, the words themselves, are constantly changing. Our two backup vocals, panned left and right, have the same idea. It is more like a guitar riff, one concept looped over and over and over. What's interesting is how they both bounce off of each other, starting in each other's spaces. We have a left panned quarter note followed by a right panned quarter note, followed by a left panned quarter note, and a right panned eighth note, and then they just sort of line up, kind of, but we have this ping ponging effect at the beginning of this phrase. This is the kind of very obvious hocketing that I was talking about at the beginning of the analysis. Um, and it's such a fun idea. This could have been done with anything. They could have brought in more guitars. They could have brought in xylophones or saxophones. Anybody could have done this, but at least for me, you guys know I love my layered, harmonized vocals, and for this to be more vocal stuff was just the icing on the cake for me. And not only that, but it provides denser lyrics that I'm kind of intimidated to get into later. um, and that was just phenomenal. Now, at this point, I think we return back to the first verse. Honestly, I don't know because the structure of the song is crafted entirely by lyrical content. The music underneath does not change at all. Those hand drums continue to play, the back and forth on the guitars continue to go, the bass does its thing for the entire time, and the drum pattern on the kit doesn't seem to change at all. We get the bass kicks on the downbeats, we get eighth note hi-hat hits, and some syncopated snare attacks. None of that seems to change ever in this track. And you know that's kind of familiar. What else have everything this week. um Not to this degree. This is literally one idea played for 6 minutes or something. Susie and the Banshees and the Police had a small bit of variety, but it was one concept over and over. In those cases, it was an A B A B A B thing going on, although Susie changed up the end of that. This is literally, musically at least, A. I thought about doing that for longer, but that's, no. Um, Lyrically, we do shift between sections. There is a chorus and a verse and something I attribute to a bridge. There are guitar solos which musically change things up, so it's more like we have a really long A followed by a B, followed by a really, really long A again, and then by a B. But see, that's interesting too. It brings up the topic of what is a musical phrase, or more specific, what is a musical section? What is a verse? Is it when the lyrics change? Is it when the music changes? Is it only allowed when both change? Could the guitar solo just be seen as a variation of A? Should I even qualify that as a new section at all? When the vocals come in, when we hit an obvious repeated vocal line, like most choruses would have, is it a chorus if the music hasn't changed to reflect that? I don't know. Some of this, honestly, to me feels more subjective, and it's not beneficial to any conversation as much like with genre. It's more of a way to help people understand and discuss something than it is as a steadfast rule of how you need to observe music. It's not as interesting or as educational. It's like most language, it's designed to help communication, not necessarily to drive conversation. But it is some interesting stuff that this song has made me think about. Now, we kind of bounce back and forth a couple of times between this isolated vocal and the bouncing back and forth extra vocals, and then we hit a point with a five-way vocal harmony, and you can't know how much joy that gave me. That was beautiful. Now, it was odd. I don't, I mean, it was 1980. I don't know what kind of pitch correction stuff they had. I don't know if they even cared to pitch correct it. Uh, there was some dissonance in one of the vocal lines at one of the points. I think it was on the second word. There's also some people who hit the note and stuck on it, and some people who hit the note, dipped down, and came back up. There was some embellishments that some vocalists did and others didn't. If anything, it just lines up more with this idea of so many unique ideas that play off of everyone else. The dip and embellishment isn't really anything on its own, but I bring it up specifically in this case because in context, no one else did it. And context is so important for so much of this song that it makes me think it was intentional, but I'm not sure. Especially given one other person, at least, was a bit flat in some of the notes. Um, So yeah, a bit of a grab bag here. I really like the idea. The execution for me feels. I'm gonna say the execution is interesting. I don't know if I like it or not. It pushes hard against my general dislike for dissonant tones without thematic purpose, and with the rest of the song being very harmonically fine. It was weird for this one moment to be dissonant. So yeah, it was just it, and the second time it came around, it was even more obvious for me. So I'm a little. I have questions about it, I suppose. How intentional it was, and if it was intentional, what was the purpose of it? Was it just to bring attention to differing ideas, which is what a lot of this song has done? But after this, we heard a very cool thing. See, there had been two groups. I kind of talked about them in tandem, but there have been two groups of backing vocals that did repeated lines that went against and around and within and supported our lead vocal element. And here we got to hear both or all four of those lines in tandem sans our lead vocal. This was cool because it put the vocal work in the same realm as the rest of our background music. It was devoid of its typical context, again, very important aspect of this song, and instead we had to accept it on its own. What do these parts mean? What do they say? What do they do when they aren't bouncing off of the core line, which feels like their purpose? They're there to support something that is no longer there. They're like support beams where the architecture that sits above it is missing. They're just there now. They lack function. So this was a very cool part because we got to hear some unique rhythmic syncopation and hocketing ideas that they would never have produced prior to this. They've never been played with each other before, and having that center vocal channel might have actually brought too much attention to how they bounce off of that and wouldn't have allowed us to hear all the really cool things. It also would have been a bit cluttered, five vocal lines and the full band. So it was very cool for them to remove this context that most of these lines have, all these lines have had in the past, and allow us to find new context within the lines that they're played against now. It was just a phenomenal part. Absolutely love that. Me lyrically, I don't know that it made any sense. Maybe it did. Maybe those lines are have new, just like how we can get new understanding of them in their new context and new things that are around them. Maybe having these words pushed up against each other like this can bring new context to them as well. I don't know. We'll get into that in a second. But yeah, just on a purely musical level, that's phenomenal. The last thing we really need to talk about is the guitar solos, and I have nothing to say about them. They Yeah, that's a lot. You guys know me. I don't know that I have a lot of poignant things to say about them, but I have thoughts. Both of them are sparse in a song that is heavily layered and syncopated. There are very few moments of rest and break. In fact, as far as I can remember, there isn't a single moment of silence in the track. It is a consistent forward flow of rhythmic complexity. While there might be moments without a lead melody, there are no moments of rest. So it's interesting then for our guitar to push so hard against the established melodic phrasing that we've had in our vocals, which the more layers we bring in, the more complex and less moments of silence we have. And instead, our opening guitar solo feels more like a jazz solo, playing three or four notes and taking a full bar off. I don't quite know what it means other than pure contrast. I don't even know if they had that in mind specifically about it being more of a jazz solo than a rock solo. And when we get into the final guitar solo, or the second one, it does feel more rock oriented than jazz. The phrasing is closer to a rock guitar than a jazz guitar phrasing. But this opening one, all I could hear, especially given we just came off a jazz week, is jazz phrasing. Play a few notes, rest a little bit. Play a few notes, rest a little bit. Um, the second solo, though, was mostly comprised of uh, some choice notes, that's for sure. If I had mentioned that there's very little dissonance in most of the track, but that's not true. Our guitar brings in some really interesting notes from outside the key and leans into them so hard. It's an odd choice. Not only are we playing these long quarter and half notes that are out of key, but we're also not doing any of the breaks we had earlier, so you're just kind of left to deal with these spicy notes. Sometimes not spicy, sometimes they're a bit more consonant, but not all the time. You really don't know what you're getting until he plays it, and then you're just left there to wallow in it until the guitarist decides to change. They're interesting. They seem so much at odds with the rest of the song's rhythmic complexity and harmonic simplicity. A lot of it is based around consonant, powerful tones. It's kind of a laid back, almost uplifting vibe. It's positive and chill, but energetic. Right? Maybe not even chill, just positive and energetic. The chill part kind of it's I get that a little bit from the hand drums because they kind of give me a reggae vibe, but the song doesn't have a reggae vibe. It's just that one instrument. So chill, it's just energetic and laid back, right? Energetic and rhythmically complex. Maybe not even laid back. And then we get we both of the guitar lines that just do the complete opposite in different capacities to what the song has done up until now. It's confusing at best. Like I said, I really don't know what to say about the guitar solos. Let's hit some lyrics. I'm going to mostly gloss over the repeated lines, otherwise we'd be here forever. Verse 1. Sometimes the world has a load of questions. Seems like the world knows nothing at all. The world is near, but it's out of reach. Some people touch it, but they can't hold on. I mean, I can kind of, if we look at this as like, uh, more of a figurative way of speaking about the world. Not the world itself, but maybe the people within the world. All the people as a whole, not any individual person or country or culture, but just the world, and not even just now, but all of all time. The world seems like it knows nothing at all, and it has a load of questions. So it might be ignorant, but it wants to correct that. That is a perfectly fine stance to have, world. Keep it up. But this latter half says the world is near but out of reach. Some people touch it but can't hold on. I don't know about that one. You lost me there. Now the chorus, this is cool. One of our lines says, night must fall now, darker, darker. The other line says, she's got to move the world, got to move the world, got to move the world. Amidst all of this, our center channel linear vocal says she's moving to describe the world. She has messages for everyone. She's moving by remote control. Hands that guide her are invisible. Right over my head. Somebody has to move the world, and by doing so, night must fall. Maybe this is some sort of deity, like a sun god. In some more historical cultures where, actually, I guess it's not all historical cultures. There's probably some people who still practice this. But, polytheistic culture, let me put it that way. And there is a god who physically moves the sun, right? Maybe this god is female in this mythology. And this god must move the world, and this must bring nightfall. Um, but moving to describe the world and has messages for everyone, moving by remote control. See, this is interesting because it says hands that guide her are invisible. If this is indeed that, to me, it's a bit of a satirical take that the gods that people praise and worship are actually being controlled by someone else. Now, it could be another god, and this could just be some really cool mythology, or it could be a human that has crafted this mythology to control the masses. I don't know. Honestly, I think I'm looking way too deep into this, but that's where my mind goes. Verse 2, the world has a way of looking at people. Sometimes we feel the world is wrong. She loves the world and all the people in it. She shakes them up when she starts to walk. This is the second time the world has been personified, and the second time that personification has been removed to turn it back into an object. Notice in the first verse, the world wanted to ask questions and seemed to not know anything, but then it was just something that people wanted to touch, and it was something that needed to be moved and described. It no longer had agency in its life. It no longer was personified. Same thing happened here. We personified it as something that looks at people, but then once again it is something that loses that personification. Interestingly, this goddess loves the world and all the people in it. She shakes them up when she starts to walk. I can't think of them. I mean, literally, a god, you figure they're super tall and tons of weight. Imagine if Zeus came down and decided to step on the earth. That sounds bad. To walk on the earth. His sheer weight and size could shake it. And maybe that's what they're going for here. Just something very literal, more so than some of the figurative stuff going on. So our second chorus has different supporting ideas. One says divine to define. She is moving to define, so say so, so say so. The other one says she wanna define, so say so, so say so. Our lead says she is only partly human being. She defines the possibilities, holding on for an eternity gone ending without finishing. So now we don't necessarily have a god, but a demigod, partly a human being. She defines the possibility. So that's interesting. It could also just be a way of saying that this is an ideal that people should live up to, much like the gods kind of were in Greek. Yeah, Greek mythology. It was the idealized form of man. This is what you should live up to be. It defines the possibilities of your greatness, right? You could be like this. You got to work for it, though. You're mortal, but I mean, you could. This is a possibility. Maybe that's what they're saying there. Holding on for an eternity, gone and ending without finishing. We hit our first guitar solo, which, as stated, I don't get. We have a verse 3. The world moves on a woman's hips. The world moves and it swivels and bobs. The world moves on a woman's hips. The world moves and it bounces and hops. A world of light, she's going to open her eyes up. A world of light, she's going to open her eyes up. She's going to hold it, move. Oh, I forgot about that part. That was so good. 4 lines, all having this rigidity to it, and our center channel starts with the rigidity and introduces dotted notes to create some syncopated ideas against it. Yes. I love that section. Vocal harmonies and good rhythmic ideas. So good. She's going to hold it, move it, hold it, move it, hold it, move it, hold it, move it. A world of light. She's going to open her eyes up. So yeah, we just have this demigod who appears to have The ability to enlighten people. Also, she moves the world, which I think we've already established back in the opening chorus. Actually, no, I take that back. Oh, yeah, it was the opening chorus. Um, but it's done so in a bit more of a sexualized way now. She doesn't just move the world; she moves it on her hips. And then the world moves and it swivels and bops and bounces and hops. But beyond that, which feels very 80s, then we get to the interesting part. It says, the world of light, she's going to open our eyes. This is the part of enlightenment. And see, at this point, I have to question, is this song about a deity? Is this some sort of crafted mythology for this song? Or is this just an intricate way to sing about a specific person in our vocalist lives? Maybe they have a woman that is the world to them, and they're like, oh, what if we turn that into a song? We take the whole concept of them being the whole world, in a way of, bowing down to a goddess among men kind of vibe. Because prior to this, there's a lot of it that kind of feels mythological. But this specific verse, at least the beginning of it, sort of grounds a lot of the context and makes it a bit less figuratively mythological and more metaphorically about someone. Maybe that's just me. We go back to the chorus. It's a repeat of what we had. And then we have, oh yeah, the collection of all the lines. Divine to define, she's moving to define. She want to define, night must fall, darker, darker, and she has to move the world, got to move the world. So all four of our backing tracks so far going off at the same time. It goes to the world of light. She's going to open her eyes, hold it, move it, hold it, move it. We go back to the four lines, and we do that until the song. Oh, until we hit a guitar solo. So actually, yeah, I didn't mean to wrap up my thoughts there, but I did that very succinctly. I thought we had more to go. I was just kind of hitting a midpoint thought. But yeah, this reads like a mythology. But there is one key part where it makes me think that maybe who's our lyricist on this? I don't have one. And it's just written by everybody. Anyways, I get the gist that there is maybe not even just a woman, but maybe just the concept of the goddess among men that inspired them to write this. It does feel a bit metaphorical for just a beautiful person that you devote your life to and your world revolves around them, kind of thing. But it's done in a very technically impressive way. I mean, it took me three verses to hit a point where I was like, oh, maybe this is a metaphor for just a woman instead of the whole mythology of it all. Those are my thoughts on Talking Heads' The Great Curve. The Great Curve is her hips, isn't it? Or, I mean, it really could be a lot of parts of a woman, but that's what they're going for, right? There's no point in here in the song that talks about curves in any way other than her hips. Those are my thoughts. Oh man, that one little blemish. Now I'm like, ugh. I mean, it's comical, but it also hasn't aged terribly well. Those are my thoughts on Talking Heads: The Great Curve. Hit me up in the comments. Did you enjoy this or not? Is there anything you'd like to add on to what I said, or maybe correct me on? Let me know. Drop a comment. Above that, if you could, head into the description box, and there's a link for Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here, which has links for everything related to the channel. You can find ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord community, the music I make, and so much more. Check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. We have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow. 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. We'll explore more new wave music and check out another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.